I was looking at you on the phone earlier on. A few questions for you, and maybe these are myths, but you know, it needs to be talked about. I'd have heard in America, and going back many years, where companies would have genetically modified corn or whatever, and it was under license, the farmer had to sow it, and that if some of it with the wind was brought out to the next field, they were tied into basically having to pay a fee as well, even though they mightn't be involved in it. I'd have read it. Is that correct with some of this? On top of that, I think the European Green Deal, unfortunately, they probably didn't listen to the most important people in all of this, and I think that's the farmers. And I think that the academia that were doing this up will have to go back to the drawing board, because we see now in a wartime era, when we talked about having food, that we were going to nearly have it coming out our ears with all they were telling us we'd have a food. And with the, you know, the cuts that there were, or the different things that they were talking about doing, your own country, be it down Mayo or be it in the west of Ireland or up Donegal, that you'd be re-wetting and you'd be taking the sheep or the lock of cattle, whatever, that have, you know, they have got this very wrong. And we have got to have Europe, in my opinion, sort of self-sufficient, because what we tended to do in Europe, in the total of the Green Deal, is we are becoming the salespeople. If it's dirty, get Brazil or get some other country or continent to produce it, and we'll set it off so long as it's not putting up carbon emissions. But I think it should come home to us at the moment that basically heat and food is two of the most important things you'll have, and we're stuck at the moment. We're like birds in a nest with our beaks open at the moment, waiting for oil to come into us and waiting for all the different things, and we have left ourselves high and dry. Would you have a problem with that? And in the line of, and I was interested in listening to Dr. Patrick Harrison earlier on. You talked about, you know, the health, you know, the different problems that people have in health, and that you can go and change, be it a plant, to perform better if you go that side of it. You talked about blockages, and is the big blockage EU regulation? That's what I'm trying to establish. And then there was a reference made to the member states. Has member states sort of their own independent, say, decisions to be able to make, or is it on a European decision that this is all going to hang on? There were just a few questions you made.
That's a good question. Do you want to?
Yes, the regulation, it'll depend on what happens in the European Union. The directive, hopefully, it could be amended to allow for, hopefully, CRISPR-Cas, certain types of CRISPR-Cas technologies. That's what I would hope, and that could be done quickly. And that would be harmonised that with the rest of the world. So grain coming in will be exported.
You said a word there, amended. Where are you on about amending? Surely you don't think that the civil servants in Ireland are going to amend it?
No, this hopefully will be done in Brussels, but the Irish government, the department, Eamon Ryan's department, would be involved in those debates, and I think they'll be coming in this evening. So it's at EU level. I'll answer one other question. You mentioned, Michael, about many years ago in the States, there has been a number of cases. That was in the early days of GM crops or GM technology, where one farmer took a case, or a few farmers took a case against his neighbour from cross-contamination. And I think there was a few court cases, and basically at the end of the day, they did find cross-contamination because pollen wouldn't flow. But the question is, did it cause an environmental harm? So if you're growing oilseed rape here, this side of the border of Mayo, and it went into County Roscommon, into your county, Galway, sorry. You're on the border, I believe. So the question is, did it cause an environmental harm? And I believe it didn't. And them are the key things. But there was a few court cases, but that's gone back. We haven't heard of any of those in years.
Is it under licence that you pay, that a farmer pays a fair price, that a fairly dear price to have this, that it's like you're basically tied down to it with the company?
Well, I suppose it didn't pertain to Ireland because most of the GM crops well, we only have one that's approved for use in the European Union. That would be the maize crop that's tolerant to the European Corn Board, as said, and that wouldn't pertain to Irish agriculture because we don't have that. But there would be, I would imagine, some sort of technologies that farmers might have to pay, but I would suggest that you might ask those of the department when they come in. I wouldn't be very au fait with that, but I think there is some royalties or whatever. But remember, in Ireland, Teagasc's breeding programme has been very successful over the last 70, 80 years, and they get royalties from some of their technologies. So you can see it happens with companies, state bodies as well, you know.
Right, thanks.
But I suppose there has to be some payback in terms of the investment in research and development. I suppose maybe, you know, that's where part of that comes from. Could I answer your question on, say, you know, you mentioned Ukraine and the food kind of issues. Like, we can't say that tonight CRISPR is going to solve the problems that have, you know, come about with the most recent shocks in terms of our food system. But I really do think it'll be a mistake on our part if we ignore this technology. We're not talking about today or tomorrow, but we're talking in the near term that we need to embrace this technology. We need an increase in research and development. Like, we have the expertise in our universities, but to increase that expertise, to increase, you know, our facilities, our growth facilities, to make sure we're ready for the next shock that's going to come along. Like in my paper, I referenced how Ireland are currently, I suppose, comfortably at #1 in terms of the Global Food Security Index. But I think last year it was Singapore, and they're now relegated to 17th place. So this is a very movable, dynamic index, and we shouldn't become complacent in this country. And I think if we are to realise our ambitions, that the Irish government's ambitions in terms of, you know, the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy, it can't, as I've said earlier, be business as usual. It's just not possible. The diseases that farmers are faced with, they're not going to disappear overnight because, you know, we have some ambitions in terms of our, you know, climate and all the rest. So we actually really do need this technology, and we need to invest in research in Ireland to make sure we're ready to go. And that we have, this is not like an overnight solution, as I say. So we can be doing CRISPR in our labs, but we need to know how those products will perform at field trial level. So those field trials take a little bit of time as well, you know, to develop the proof of concept, to do analysis, and so we need to be ready.
Are they allowed at the moment under licence or what?
Well, no, not in terms of CRISPR, no. I mean, this is what Tom is talking about in terms of the ruling. So it's really important that our politicians are fully engaged with this and are aware of the advantages of this technology and what the regulations will mean and what it will mean if we're not able to use this as non-GMOs. Yeah. Does anybody else want to?
Just very briefly, when I talked about roadblocks, the regulations which apply to CRISPR or gene editing or gene therapy for medical purposes are completely different and governed in a completely different way. So that wouldn't apply to the kind of stuff that we're doing for medical development.
Okay.
That's a whole different ball.
Just one thing I'd like to inform you. In June of 2020, the EU Commission had to withdraw the power away from the 27 member states when they were placing the vaccines on the market to protect the population of Europe. Why? Because it's a very bureaucratic system, because most of those vaccines were produced using GM technology. But a lot of people in Ireland, or indeed across the European Union, didn't realise that actually happened. So that expedite the whole thing, obviously, could be still waiting for vaccines. And it's the same, ironically, it's the same technology, GM technology, that's producing the plants as produced the Oxford Seneca vaccine. So as I said to you before, science is hugely important. Gene editing is hugely important. If we don't use it in the European Union, we'll be importing all their food, and our farmers will be standing up to nothing. And that would be an awful shame. And that's why, as I said, I'm adamant, and thanks again to the Senator for putting it on, to come in here and talk to you guys and to listen to us, because I think I felt, as someone who has worked in this area and I retired 5 years ago, I said that it was enormous on me as a former regulator, the new bit about the regulations and where it was going in Europe. And things don't happen that fast in Europe, as you know, so I'd be a little bit concerned there.
That's a settlement.